class of 2018, and I currently serve as your Alumni Board President. It's an honor to begin our first Alumni Award Plenary of our 2026 reunion. Today we will be recognizing our J.D. Dawson and Rebecca Rice Award recipients. Let's have a general round of applause. So first, in the first half of the plenary, Scott Sanders will be presenting Michael Casselli's with the J.D. Dawson Award, and then I will introduce Gregory Orr and present him with the Rebecca Rice Award. We will reserve time for Q&A after each presentation, and then we'll have a little book signing at the end, too. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Scott.
Thank you, Coco. Scott Sanders, Antioch College Archivist. I did not go to school here. I am, however, the 2011 J.D. Dawson Award winner. I don't mind telling you I'm really glad mine didn't have a picture of J. Dudley on it. This is a really grim and severe looking picture. You know, if you did not know, a very long-time Antioch faculty member, he came to teach math in the mid-1920s. And I don't think he retired until the 1960s. And so he had just about every job anybody could have over the course of his very long career, such to the point that he was known as Mr. Antioch. And so, thanks to Louise Smith, I am Mr. Antiochiana. So that's close. And so, I would like to present Mr. Antioch from Mr. Antiochiana to my buddy Casselli. So if you don't know, it's the only award reserved for people who didn't go to college. Already has one, for instance, the late great. In any event, when I got my award, Nina Myatt, class 53, who was the previous J.D. Dawson award winner, introduced me and promptly got off the stage. So I don't have that luxury today. I will be interviewing my buddy Michael, who I've known for a very long time. We have to share a mic. Well, then let me just get a little closer then. Michael, how did you get to Antioch College in the first place?
It was funny, I was just talking with Dylan, who I've just recently met. The reason I got here, I had a friend named Sherry Rizek, who we went to an alternative school together called the Cleveland Urban Learning Community. No classes, no grades, no teacher, all dialogic learning. Very small, private, but sliding scale school. Very much like Antioch. There was a student sat on the executive board. I was the executive director for 1 year as a student. And it was started by two young Jesuits in Cleveland. So we went to school together there. We also were in junior high together. And she came down to Antioch in 1982 to attend. And I came down to visit her. Came here, saw the school, and then applied and came next year. After they made me go to community college, they weren't sure if I could handle college level work because of the school I went to, which I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah, that's funny. So you kind of went to Antioch before you went to Antioch. And so when you were a student, who were the people that influenced you the most?
Okay, it's Karen Shirley. She was my academic advisor.
You could explain whoever one of them ever so.
Yeah, Karen Shirley was my academic advisor, later a good friend. We actually co-created the original arts curriculum for the reopened college.
So for those who don't know, say who she was.
Oh, Karen Shirley was a ceramics teacher, also a critical theory, art theory teacher. She came here as a student, and then she came here for a year. They had a program where they would have someone come in for a year. She left, and then they invited her back. So she was my primary contact. Then John Ronshine, who I took music with, opera, contemporary opera, music theory. He was amazing. People, with his hair flying around. He would turn on like opera in full volume and then yell over the top of it. Always participated in the things we were doing. I was with a very active group of people, artists, and we were doing a lot of performance, a lot of alt stuff all the time. And he would join in. One time we were doing a version of Ian Esco's The Leader, and we were in the cafeteria, and he just got everybody starting to pound on the table going, the leader, the leader. And the whole place is going, and people are smacking the windows looking for the leader to come. And Rob Schein walks through and says, where's Ian Esco? I'll eat him for lunch. So he was amazing. Demi Reber took 4 years of dance with Demi, was in every dance concert while I was on campus. It was amazing, because I was a little punk rocker then, really into slam dancing. And then she turned me on to contact improv. I was like, wow, this is perfect. This is exactly kind of a nice transition. And she also supported me because I did very kind of pedestrian choreography in my work, because I wasn't really a trained dancer, and I wasn't really interested in training as a modern dancer. I didn't like a lot of the movement, but I really like pedestrian work, Simone Forte, Yvonne Rainer, people like that. And then contact. So Steve Paxton and those folks, for people who know stuff about bands. Who else was there? And then there was Alan Jones. He was my painting teacher. So spent a lot of time on the 4th floor in the art building. He was amazing. We used to have painting races where he would just go, okay, let's both paint a figure as fast as we can. And we'd stop and we'd take out his Marlboros and smoke. This is when you could still smoke on campus. Karen used to smoke and drink her Coca-Cola in the caf because we used to eat together a lot. And also it was really nice because all of these people would have you over their house for meals, things like that. And I really thought that the first name basis, I got really used to that, but I really appreciated that kind of disruption of the kind of traditional power dynamic between teacher and student. I thought that was really important. I still think it's important. I do the same thing in my teaching. A lot of the stuff that I got from those people I incorporate into my work. And then there was Gary Bauer, who came in after Alan. He was also a painter. I had him for a short period of time. And then Denny Partridge came in my 4th year. 3 years of my time in college. We didn't have a theater department, but we took the building over because you could in those days because it was in terrible shape and it wasn't being supported. And we did our own work. We developed, we did an incredible adaptation of Metamorphosis. The first thing I worked on with this group of people I had talked about before was called the New Gore Variety Show. With Mary Steger, Jordan Tamagni, a bunch of folks, and it was basically about being queer and being in theater. And so it was amazing. We had amazing times, and I had amazing people mentoring me through my work, and really brought me to understand the power and the importance of the arts across the board.
We have an amazing photograph in the Antioch of Michael and Beatles wig and a suit from one of those student-run productions.
Minor surgery.
Minor surgery, it was called. I did not know that.
He was the first show in an amphitheater after getting out.
So I think this next question was addressed, but I'm going to give you a chance to riff off of it, and that's, what was it about your Antioch education that made you the person that you have become?
Okay, wow. Chaos. There's one. No, it was the freedom and the focus on learning for learning's sake, right? I see it disappearing so much, or devalued so much in higher education. This idea that you go to school to learn. I went to school because I wanted to go to school. I wasn't thinking about a job, In Antioch, because it was so DIY, I learned how to do lots of things on my own, which then led me to my career later on.
Like for instance?
I used to do large installation performances on the golf course. My second year, I did one with 14 stations of the cross, basically, stages, and then there were performances on each one of bizarre things, stories I had been told by people about other people, and so they were being recreated for the most part. Very strange stories. And you were free to interact. You could go up on the stages. You could take a stage on yourself. I had a good friend, my friend Greta. She was in a blue dress with a shaved head with a big beef tongue, and she is hitting the beef tongue on the counter, and going. And had a bottle of blood. And nobody likes a tough tongue. That's all she did the whole performance. And then these would be at night, and people could come and see it. I did another one called Figure Ground, which is 3 large 15-foot screens on the golf course. with theater lights lighting them up, and then about 80 performers behind, broken up behind each screen. And the idea, the direction was to play with your distance from the plane to make yourself larger and smaller. And they each had a movement dynamic that I gave them. So when they would transition, they had to use that dynamic. And they could be clothed, they could be naked. Back then, behind the pool was clothing optional. It was a very different time. But yeah, so they were free to interpret what I was asking them to do and play with their performance. So I just gave them some qualities, right? So I learned how to organize with people, how to work collaboratively, which is very important to me. And I learned about how to treat people and how someone who's teaching you is also mentoring you, but can also be your friend, right? And that opens up a dynamic in a learning situation that I think is unparalleled, right? You have this ability to communicate one-to-one. There's not this wall in front of you. So a lot of that I took with me later on. I went to grad school at Rhode Island School of Design, did sculpture, MFA in sculpture. And then I moved to New York, was a finished carpenter for a year, a very high-end finished carpenter in New York City. Saw lots of really beautiful places, really beautiful places. But then I went to this place called The Kitchen, which we now have a co-op at. It's a center for performance. It was started in Soho in the 70s. And I applied for their technical director position, and I got it. And it was there that I met everyone I would work with for the next 20 years. All of the artists, dancers, performers I would work with. And I started freelance after 2 years because a lighting designer named Carol Mullins, she was like, oh, are you interested in production managing something? And there's this company in New York, this called On Guard Arts. They used to do site-specific performances every summer. And so this was the first, this one was up in Harlem, 106th, at this place that used to be a hospital, a regional Kettering hospital, and it's a beautiful Gothic mansion. And I worked there, and we did a performance directed by Ann Bogart and written by playwright Chuck Mee. And that was my first introduction. And then I just started getting work and able to work, independently as a freelance, which eventually led me to being a designer, video designer, set designer, performer. I toured with companies extensively all over Europe. I was able to go to Japan, was able to go to Australia, I was able to go to Singapore, ended up living in Amsterdam for a year because I've been on tour, and when you're on tour, you're making lots of free money, and it's all going in the bank. So I didn't go back to New York for a year. I stayed in Amsterdam and worked as an artist. Got an apartment for $150 right there. The main train station, and rode my bike out to the bus, which is the forest, to an artist colony out there at an old military base, and we made work and traveled work. I worked with a guy named Eric Holbein, who was a flame artist, and he made this piece called Delusions of Self-Immolation, which was a machine that set you on fire and put you out. And it's in its full function. If you were to set it on full, it's basically a way to end your life. No one ever said it on full. I did it medium because I was interested, and I was like, and I helped build it, so I'm like, okay. I did it on short rare as the first thing. And you're in a Lycra suit, and it's covered with flame-proof gel, and so is your hood and stuff. But you could see because you could open your eyes with the gel around it. So you're on a platform, and they have a laser, and it sights the flamethrower at you, and then it hits you with flame, and then it spins you around. The other nozzle hits you with water, and so you could see the flame wrapping around your body, and then it spun you around. And I did it on rare because we were at a combustion festival in Graz, Austria. And I said, do it rare. And I said, okay, do medium. And I got on, and I knew what the count on medium was. It was supposed to be 1.7 seconds. And it started in like one, and then spun around. But so it's what Antioch gave me the ability to do is, because of co-op, because of going to new places, right? Learning how to adjust and adapt to a new environment. It made me able to adjust and adapt to all kinds of environments. New York in the early 90s, dirty before Giuliani, I liked it much better then. But I got to work with all these amazing artists there. You know, a lot of the kind of grandparents of the experimental New York performance scene. So yeah.
Actually, I didn't think the guy needed me up here at all. So we don't have a whole lot of time left before. But that was great. I would like to know if you have any good Camelot stories.
Yes, I did Camelot with my friend Larry Steger. The late great. We both had blonde wigs. I was in army gear with a helmet, and we both had purses full of Jello.
Some people don't know what Camelot is.
Oh, Camelot was a bike race. Memorial Day weekend. When I was here, it was in front of South because South was boarded up.
That's what Camelot was.
And that's where the hall was. And so it was a race of 2 people per team, 1 bicycle. All you had to do was get the bicycle over the finish line. You didn't have to ride the bike over the finish line, and many people didn't, because it's probably the most violent sport thing that ever happened on campus. Maples would be parked at the end of the horseshoe with the ambulance, and it was just down and dirty. You weren't trying to hurt each other, you were basically trying to disable the bicycles. But that would be like sticks through the spokes and things like that. We had Jello in our purses so we could reach in and throw Jello at people. And our name was, and the name that Larry gave us was Fag Hags. So, that was my, one time I wrote Camelot. I didn't do it again after that.
So just one, but one's enough. So you mentioned earlier, the ability to go on out of town and go to cooperative education, which tends to be people's most transformative experience. What co-op job did you have?
The thing is, I had been working since I was 14, and I came here when I was 21. I came here because from 14 to 21, I worked in kitchens. I worked in food service. Started as a dishwasher, got up to being a chef, pastry chef, saucier, sous chef, all kinds of stuff. And I was sick of being in the kitchen. The kitchens are incredibly tense, hot, tension-filled, anxiety-ridden places. And I was ready to get out. And so I came here at 21. So I got life credit for a number of co-ops, but I did do an amazing co-op in Georgia at a place called Independent Media Artists of Georgia, and I was their technician. I've always been a technical kind of person. And I also got to work on the Atlanta Film Festival, organizing and projecting all the films.
Nice. As usual, gang, time flies when you're having fun. So he and I are supposed to stop talking and leave it open to people who wish to talk to Michael. Any questions?
Were you involved in the John Ronshine proposal for a Plenary Institute?
That was after my time. He asked if I was involved in John Ronchine's proposal for the Culinary Institute. And yeah, that was after my time, but I did take Ronchine's Art, Wine, and the Five Senses, which was a great class. Fridays, you'd roll into the caf.
I can pass the mic closer.
Thank you, Coco.
Who else has a question for Michael?
When you were sort of wrapping up or winding down in New York, how do you think the scene for performance art, PS 122 was still happening, Wooster Group was still happening, but a lot of stuff had changed. What do you think like the new things were, and what do you think the things that were winding down at that point?
Yeah, things changed a lot. PS 122 became Contemporary Performance Center. They changed the name. I did a lot of work at PS 122. I worked with a lot of the Wooster Group, Richard Foreman, a bunch of those people. What happened to a lot of things is people couldn't afford to pay rent on their DIY spaces. There was a number of people I know in Brooklyn who had companies, really amazing companies, that had to close down because rents just went out of control. And so access to space, as it used to be, like there's the Ohio Theater, there's Here Space, there's the Flea.
Did you ever work at Radio Hole?
Radio Hole, those are all really good friends of mine. I was in one of their performances. I played the lobster that they ate. Yeah, if you see my failed artist shirt that I wear, that's from Radio Home.
Oh, it does not say Radiohead in the back of it.
No, it says Radio Home.
No, it does not.
No, they're,
Collapsible Giraffe.
and that's Collapsible Hope, that's the place that's shut. And Collapsible Giraffe was their partner, and that was Jim Finley, Radio Host Eric, and Maggie, Scott, and then a bunch of other people. Yeah, it just changed, the scene changed. Again, access to spaces. Really hit it hard. There's still a lot going on, but it doesn't have the same feel. There's a great organization there called Shishama, which is run by a woman named Anita Durst. She's a very wealthy, her family owns lots of 42nd Street. It's called Shishama, and what she does is because there's so many spaces that are left vacant, business spaces, they're made available to artists for cheap or for free, all over, all 5 boroughs. So that's a great organization that's still there.
And Larry will be our last question.
How did your experience at Jesuit school inform your art?
That's a good question. I like that.
Well, the Jesuits I was engaged with were very free thinkers. They eventually left the order because they wanted to get married. I did work at Fordham also, which was much more strict as far as the Jesuit school. But the alternative school, it was their ideas, right? They're the ones who started. Father Shea, he started this school with these radical kind of approaches to education. No classes, no grades, no teachers. But I was lucky. It was the 70s. I grew up at a time when there was a lot of experimentation going on in education. It's when 70s when Department of Education was first formed. And there, you had various pedagogy of the oppressed. You had all these things kind of informing young teachers. Like my English teacher in 8th grade had us read Stranger by Camus. And this was in public school, right? Because they were young and they were thinking about different ways of approaching how you learn and how you accept knowledge.
Okay, let's give Michael another warm.
We need a picture. Hey, Michael, we need a picture, Michael. We need a picture with you.
Can't see the shirt.
It looks just like you.
That's what I was looking for before.
You got it? Well, okay, excellent.
In the ceaseless interplay of disorder and order in our daily lives, it is possible and important to imagine that there are certain situations where this unstable interaction can be held for a moment in steady state. One such suspended moment is the poem, which freeze frames the interplay as language so we can contemplate it, feel it, and concentrate on it. Writes Gregory Orr in chapter 4 of his book, Poetry of Survival. Orr has dedicated his life, which is to say, generated his vocation, by way of this sustained poetic attention. Named for the first female trustee, longtime faculty of Antioch College and class of 1860, the Rebecca Rice Award recognizes alumni who by their actions, achievements, and leadership have distinguished themselves in the college. The recipients of this award are persons who have excelled in their vocation or field of study. But how do we measure this excellence? It is difficult to gauge in the space of an introduction if one should supply an inventory of accomplishments, often a convenient metric for the impact of a life and its work, or if the activity of biography requires a more singular kind of engagement. I could offer, as a bit of narrative, that Gregory Orr transferred to Antioch after 2 years at a traditional college because he wanted to devote himself to writing poetry and thought creativity was more valued and nurtured at Antioch than it had been at Hamilton. While Antioch didn't have structured creative writing courses, it did have ample room for students to design their education. He went on to earn his MFA from Columbia in 1972, and then to the University of Virginia in 1975, where he was founder and first director of its very esteemed MFA program in writing, and served from 1978 to 2003 as poetry editor of the Virginia Quarterly Review. Along the way, he picked up a Guggenheim Fellowship, 2 poetry fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, and the 2003 award in literature by the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Greg was also a Rockefeller Fellow at the Institute for the Study of Culture and Violence, where he worked on a study of the political and social dimension of the lyric in early Greek poetry. Greg is also the author of a memoir, The Blessing, which was chosen by Publishers Weekly as one of the 50 best nonfiction books of 2002. His autobiographical essay on his experiences as a volunteer in the civil rights movement, Return to Hayneville, was reprinted in Best Essays of 2009, Best Creative Nonfiction 2009, and Pushcart Prizes. In addition, he is the author of Poetry as Survival and a primer for poets and readers of poetry. He's been interviewed by Krista Tippett for her On Being series, and his personal essay was chosen to be broadcast on National Public Radio's This I Believe series in the spring of 2006. Alternative to this litany of accomplishment, I can also offer that after my mother died suddenly, a little over 7 months ago, a therapist recommended reading Gregory Orr's collections concerning the book that is the body of the beloved, and that in those pages I have continued to find some language for loss and a way through its solitudes. A rock in the sea that offers a site for resurrection. I have borne witness to the power of Orr's poetic vocation, and today I am pleased to present him with the Rebecca Rice Award in recognition of his contributions to our common survival.
Just like me. It'll look alike content. Oh, yeah, here we go. I, of course, prepared 30 pages of what to say for 10 minutes. And I don't know what I'll do. She probably said anything important already. I have to find my right glasses. It doesn't matter.
Mic by your mouth.
Yes, mic by my mouth.
Yeah.
Put your mouth where your mic is. Yeah, I was raised in the rural Hudson Valley, upstate New York. I came here in the summer of 1966 as a transfer student from Hamilton College. Very conventional school, good school, but very conventional. A week after I got to Hamilton, my freshman year, I knew I could not be there. It took me 2 years to find out where I could be. I knew what I wanted. I wanted more than anything and only to write lyric poems. I'll get to that in a sec, I guess. No, I'll get to it now. When I was 17 and wrote my first poem that anybody saw, with the encouragement of my high school librarian, I knew that writing poems was the main thing I was going to do, was all I wanted to do with my life. And that was it. I knew I had to do that more than anything else in the world. Hamilton had nothing to offer in relation to that at all. And it took me 2 years to decide that maybe Antioch would value creativity, and so of course it would nurture me as a poet. And I came here. And indeed, creativity obviously is a very important value in our Antioch world. I also maybe thought that I would find poet teachers here and things called poetry workshops where you met with peers and a mentor and would, grow as a poet. That wasn't here. There was nothing here. Okay? But what there was here was the possibility of independent studies. Of if you knew what you wanted to do and you could con somebody into sponsoring it, faculty, you were on your way. I think 90% of my academic experience here was independent studies. Some of them were writing poems, and a lot of them were reading poets and reading about ideas about poetry. When I think of Antioch, I think of the 4 freedoms that FDR once said in a speech. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. For me, Antioch had 4 freedoms. The freedom to flail about. We're in the 60s here, we're in the past end of the 60s. Freedom to flail about, freedom to fail, freedom to not fear flunking out, and the freedom to flourish. And that flourishing happened for so many of us here. Another thing that I cherish completely about Antioch is the notion of co-op education, the work-study program. And in fact, the first co-op job I had was research assistant for a documentary that was being made about Arthur Morgan, who came here as president in 1920 and instituted the work-study program, this unique, wacky idea of what you might do to educate yourself. And it's beautiful. We all know that. It's mysterious, but beautiful. Arthur Morgan was still just down the street. At the age of 90, totally lucid. He was still here in Yellow Springs. Apart from my co-op work here, I also, in my senior year, my father pretty much last minute announced he was not going to fund me. That would be a long story about my father, which we won't talk about. But there I was with a year to go. So first I mowed lawns for the college. So there's green lawns out there. Yeah, I know them well. But then in the spring, and again this is an Antioch story, in the spring, the literature department asked me to teach a contemporary poetry reading seminar. That's crazy. 21 years old, made no sense. Of course, faculty here did not like contemporary poetry. They had no use for it. And of course, if you're going to be a poet in your time, you have to not like it, read it, and learn about it, and see if it has anything to offer you. So there I was in my final semester here teaching a seminar. God, was so scary. I mean, I'm pretty pathologically shy anyway. The only time in my life that I smoked, I would smoke cigarettes in that seminar. Especially if anybody asked a question, I could, evade the question by smoking for a while. But there you go. I want to circle back to my origin story because one of the things that I felt and still feel is that one might feel the urge and the need to write poems, and I did, but I also was fascinated by ideas about what poetry was, what it was for, or what purpose it served, outside of the pleasure of writing it or agony of writing it, and what different theories of poetry there were. So I began, investigating that also while I was here. One of the things I came up with is, Coco mentioned this, is the notion that one of the things we do, I mean, poetry is the most patterned and organized language use we humans have. Poetry and song, right? I mean, they're the same animal. Lyric poetry, I don't know diddly squat about it, or what I know you don't want to hear. But lyric poetry, that's everywhere and always, in every culture. Okay? So that means it's got to have some really big purpose. If you don't like poetry on the page, think, how could I have gotten through adolescence without rock and roll? Think about that for a minute, right? And the 6 songs when you were 16 that helped you live, helped you get through the agony of 16, there you go, poetry in action. So I wanted to think about, what poetry was. And to me, what it is here's this incredibly patterned, structured language use called a poem. And here's this human being who experiences disorder, confusion, joy, and what do they do with that? Well, one of the things you do with it, one of the things I did with it, and I think many other poets I know, you bring that disorder and confusion or delirious joy to poetry. And poetry says, hey, you've got disorder, I've got order. We'll get together and we'll make a poem. And that poem's not going to abolish disorder, because that's a lie. And it's not going to yield completely to disorder, because that's not what we're after. But what you get with a poem is you get this unfolding interplay of disorder and order, which gives us a model for what it is to be alive and also how we might survive being alive. Now, I'm going to circle back to my own personal background here, and short stories, we'll call it, he has background in trauma, okay? So, skimming across that, when I was 12 years old, growing up in the country, 12 years old, I killed a younger brother in a hunting accident. When I was 14, my mother died overnight. I won't go on about my first stepmother, except to say that she used to chase us through the house with knives. But I didn't like her enough to honor her with anecdote. When I was 18, I drove south alone in 1965 to work in the civil rights movement. And spent most of my time being beaten up and in jail with a number of other people in Jackson, Mississippi. On my way back north, I was kidnapped in rural Alabama at gunpoint by vigilantes and put in a little jail in solitary confinement for about a week while I figured out what to do with me. Which is to say, it was a town, it was a murderous town. And that's just literally an adjective. They murdered people there. They murdered people there who had been in that jail and then were released suddenly. But we won't go there. So I was looking for meaning. Meaning had been abolished by my brother's death and my mother's death. The conventional explanations and meaning schemes, like the first day my brother died, someone came in my room, my father's nurse, and she said, Peter, your brother, he's already in heaven, feasting with Jesus. And I thought, what the F? Are you crazy? He's dead at my feet. He's not, So anyway, that wasn't going to work. What you do with lyric poetry, one of the things you do is you create meanings. A poem doesn't have meanings, it is a meaning. It's a dramatization of human mysteries and human longings for order and coherence. So, I thought social justice, as it's called now, might be a meaning path for me in my life. which was desolated. And Mississippi and Alabama taught me that I wasn't quite cut out for it. Also, I didn't have the social skills, I mean, but, you know, wasn't gonna happen. Poetry was it. And from then on, I knew that's all I wanted to do. When I came here, I realized nobody cares if I write poems. Many people I know would rather I didn't. I respect that, but what can change me? So I disciplined myself while I was here. I started writing every day, writing and rewriting. And I have been keeping a journal with poems and ideas about poetry and thoughts and so on and so forth for 60 years now, 65 years. Yeah, you know, lots of words. Anyway, that's probably enough, isn't it? I felt this. I felt, one of my teachers said, you know, a poet is a solitary who makes others less alone. And I Stanley Kunitz, beautiful man. And I was a solitary, and I pretty much still am. This imitation social skills is, don't be fooled by it. I've got it. But if you're going to be a solitary, you're going to be a poet, you have to have incredible discipline. And so I learned that here. If I had had teachers here, I would have leaned on them more, and that would have been, for not me, not the way to grow. But they blessed my doing this independently. They blessed my flailing and fervent efforts to learn and to grow and to become a poet. And that's what I did. Who? I'm sorry? Who blessed me? Here?
Professors.
Yeah, Milton Goldberg, a Blake scholar who hated contemporary poetry. He said, I don't want to read anything that was written in the last 100 years. he said, let history sort out the shit and leave the stuff worth reading. That's an interesting idea, but cuts off a lot of life. Young guy named Eric Korskin came here. Remember? Oh, God. Well, there you go. Now, Judge Jerome was the poet here. Poet. Bless his soul, we got along fine, but he said, I don't see how anybody can write a poem using the word I. I've never written a poem using the word I yet, and I'm not going to. And I thought, holy shit. There goes all lyric poetry out the window. There goes Sappho. There goes all the Chinese poets and all the Japanese poets and all the Sufi poets, and Keats and Wordsworth and Coleridge and Whitman, Dickinson. No, we're not going to have that. Lyric poetry, forget it. So Judd taught me a lot by having this totally wacko idea and living it. But it you know, wasn't a good idea. Obviously, it suited him. What we do suits us, we hope, but not me. Actually, made me more stubbornly explore and mind the confusion and agony that was in me. And it did not disturb my faith in poetry as a possible path to, I can't say salvation because I'm not religious, but toward something affirmative and spiritually significant, emotionally significant. Yes, and I have to shut up now. What's the question? The question is,
Could you read us a poem?
could I? Yeah. I said, well, lyric poetry. Those aren't very long, right? Here's one. To be alive, not just the carcass, but the spark. That's crudely put. But if we're not supposed to dance, why all this music?
We have a few minutes for questions. If you raise your hand,
You're very inspiring. I got to interview Allen Ginsberg many years ago in my twisted career, and the argument was first thought, best thought, or not. So how do you edit your own poetry?
First thought, first word, best word. Yeah, that's, I mean, everybody, you have ideas about poetry if you're going to be a writer. First thing I tell my students when they're trying to write poetry, I say, if you don't know that poetry is more important than you are, you shouldn't write. You know? And eventually, poetry being more important means you have to figure out what it is. You have to come with some ideas. One that Ginsberg or maybe Kerouac is disputed. First word, best word. I rewrite my poems. I write every day. I rewrite a poem now, the average of about 300 times each poem. So obviously I'm not going with the first word, best word. Now mind you, there are exceptions to that. That poem I just recited just came to me. It's there. But also I believe, I feel a poem is a made thing. But the raw material is made. I don't know, how could the first word be the best word? That's nonsense. That's nonsense. First word is a spontaneous word, you could say that. But, I mean, yeah, it's just not true. It's if you say it's true, then you write that way, and God bless Allen Ginsberg, most of this stuff is going to disappear. You'd have to pay people to read most of these books. This is also true of every poet, but there we go.
we have time for one or two more questions for Greg.
This is the part I like, by the way, please.
I was just wondering whether you ran into other people, other poets who had attended Antioch, Mark Strand, Charles Sennett, maybe? No? And what your interaction with those were?
Yeah. I stayed up, came to teach here after I left. I came back once and met him, got to know him pretty well. Mark Strand was here, he's 13 years older than me. He was here much earlier. But he did visit campus while I was here and did a reading. And somebody in the English department, again, bless them, said, we've got this kid here who really wants to write poetry. Would you look at some of his poems? Mark said, oh, what the hell. And he did. And he read my poems. And then he said, well, this is really mostly garbage. You haven't thought what poetry really is. You don't have a deep, dark, intelligent idea like me. But if you come to New York, I will teach you what poetry is. Well, I did come to New York where he taught. He didn't teach me much. I mean, I loved him, but he was an arrogant person. But he secretly believed in me. And Stanley Kunitz was teaching at the same place. And Stanley was a born teacher, spiritual guide, and inspirer. So I grew under Stanley. And I'm grateful to Mark for that. Yeah. That sort of answer? Yeah. It'll have to do.
I have a quick question. Did you say your books are going to be here? You have some books?
Yeah. I do have a few books here to sell. But I have to tell you, this book, Poetry Survival, I'm very proud of that. It's about why people write poems, why people read them, why it exists. So, to me, thinking about the spiritual and emotional and maybe even intellectual centrality of lyric poetry culture. That's been a lifelong thing for me, and I put a lot of it into poetry survival. I still have this other book I have to write where I can prove that lyric poetry is a great bastion against oppression. Yeah, but sort of a political thing, but I've only got 6,000 pages of notes for it, so it'll take a while. The what? I can't remember either. Over the falls. Everything flows down the stream. That's why we write too, right? You want to lift something up out of the stream, change it from water into, I don't know, glass. Also, here's what you want to do as a lyric poet. I came up with this once and I loved it. Anybody ever see the old Superman with George Reeves in his pajamas on TV? There was an episode, I don't know why they were in the South Seas, but there they were on this island. And some rascals had stolen the diamond out of the idol and ran off with it, freaked out the native population. And they, of course, being bad people, went up on top of the volcano and fell in. What are we going to do? Where's that diamond? So, of course, Superman Clark Kent finds a piece of coal on the ground, right? And you see him compress this piece of coal in his hand, like this. And he opens his hand and it's the diamond. And, that's the dream of lyric poets, is to compress something so intently that it transforms itself from coal into diamond, which is a crystalline form of coal. After a million years of pressure, 1 million pounds a million years or some shit. I don't know. But you get the idea. So, there you go. Thank you very much. I can't tell you how honored I feel. Antioch was so important to me. And the people I've met here, again, not from my year necessarily or anything like that, but you're really kind of wonderful, curious, wacky people. And that's what I cherish. I remember it well.
Thank you all. A couple transitional notes. We have our next program happening in McGregor 113 at 4.